is that it's just a perfect illustration of the fact that all animals are these incredible, sensitive, intelligent individuals, and that's why we want everyone to know that every animal is someone who feels fear and pain and joy and love. They have families who they care for, they have lives that are fulfilling and meaningful to them. And that really, in all the ways that matter, we are all the same. So just let tomorrow be the first day that you look at animals with a new set of eyes and just have reverence and respect for them, because that's really what they deserve.
So Jakob Shaw is the manager of strategic initiatives for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. In this role, Shaw advances PETA's animal protection mission through legislative advocacy, youth outreach, colorful demonstrations, multimedia projects, installations such as the Council of Animals, What to Do About the Humans, featured on the National Mall, and more. His work has led to the first ban on glue traps, which ensnare small animals indiscriminately, including birds and non-target animals, as well as bugs. And they cause prolonged suffering, as well as the introduction of both federal and state bills banning the cruel devices. He also helped secure the passage of a groundbreaking ordinance in Ojai, California, banning the breeding of French bulldogs and other breathing impaired dogs and cats that cause them a lifetime of suffering. So good morning, Jakob. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today.
So the conversation today is going to be mostly about pigeons, because not many New Yorkers, including myself, know about the giant pigeon statue that's on the High Line I believe it's in Manhattan. It's really huge, and they called it Dinosaur. It's only there until sometime next year. It said until 2026. And it's kind of really interesting because most people see the pigeons and they just kind of don't think about them. So it's really cool that they put this kind of memorialization of the pigeons that they're kind of ubiquitous in New York City and apparently in cities all over the world. So it's really, really cool that they did that. And so I wanted to ask you, are there any other sculptures that you guys are aware of that also honor pigeons, whether in New York City or elsewhere?
Yeah, there are a handful. There's the pigeon statue in the Highland that you mentioned called Dinosaur that Yvonne Argote put up, which is just really this exceptional, amazing statue. There's a pigeon statue in Singapore that people love. That's also known as the buff pigeon or the fat pigeon sometimes. And this ties into what we'll be talking about today. But there's a memorial in France called the Memorial for Carrier Pigeons that honors the heroism of 20,000 pigeons who died during the two world wars.
Oh, cool. So what role do the pigeons play in New York City life at this time? Like, for example, do they keep away pests or predators when they're alone or when they gather together? Do they consume food that would otherwise have been wasted or provide essential fertilizer, et cetera, in New York?
Well, I mean, pigeons just do so much. And that's why, with spring here and summer just around the corner, PETA is reminding everyone to have respect, empathy, and consideration for pigeons who are born and bred New Yorkers, just like everyone else in the city, who are trying to make a good lives for themselves and their families. So, that's why from the High Line to Times Square, where we'll actually be having a billboard going up on April 7th, we're urging everyone to refrain from demeaning or maligning pigeons and to never use cruel wildlife control products like bird repellent gels that can poison pigeons, injure or kill them, and to really show respect for these incredible birds who we share the city with.
Oh, cool. And then there are also many pigeon coops or habitat boxes on rooftops and in other locations, both independently operated and maintained by cities around America. Do you think this is helpful and encourages them to live more safely?
Well, pigeons, like many other animals, have really been exploited terribly by humans over the course of history. And even though humans have shot at pigeons, poisoned them, bullied them, done all sorts of terrible things. Time and time again, these amazing birds have come to our rescue. And so, to just give you one example, in 1918, during World War I, when the American troops were surrounded by the Germans, there was a pigeon named Cher Ami who flew through enemy fire to deliver a message that ended up saving the lives of nearly 200 soldiers. And he lost his leg and was permanently blinded during the war. But he was recognized as being so important to the war effort that after he passed away, his body was brought to the Smithsonian to be preserved, and the French government actually gave him a Medal of Honor to recognize his heroism. So, with all that pigeons have done for us, the least we can do is show them peace and kindness, and absolutely not do things like lock them in cages, race them to death, or any of these other terrible things.
Cool. Yeah, and actually, a couple of years back, I think it was last year during the massive drought we had, Curtis Lewa from the Guardian Angels was recommending to people to, if you see pigeons that look thirsty, to give them water, because they're just like everybody else. They also need water and are experiencing this the drought that we had last year, which was really it actually killed a lot of animals. I know, like, we saw a lot of dead animals that had apparently died from dehydration.
Yeah,
So
it's awful. I mean, we do always suggest that when there's a drought, or even here in Los Angeles when the summers are excruciatingly hot, we always suggest that people leave little bowls of water outside for birds and other wildlife who need it just as much as we do.
Oh, cool. And then why do you think that pigeons, more than most other birds or animals, have such a special place in city dwellers' hearts?
I love that question. So, humans and pigeons have coexisted for thousands of years, and archaeologists have actually found ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs that depict these beautiful images of pigeons. So, there are now nearly 4 million pigeons in New York, so it's about one pigeon for every 2 humans. So, it's the perfect time for us to collectively really see them as our neighbors who belong in the city just as much as we do, treat them with respect, and then offer help when they need. Like you mentioned, giving them water if there's a drought or if the heat is really bad. And then, if you see an injured pigeon or a pigeon who's sick and seems to be suffering, you can always call PETA's 24-hour animal emergency hotline or the Wild Bird Fund in New York City that does great wildlife rehabilitation work.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we had actually covered a couple of years back the Humane Long Island Association. They had rescued a
Yeah.
pigeon who I don't remember what was wrong with the pigeon. I think he had a broken wing, if I'm not mistaken. And then they rehabilitated him and took a video of when they let him go. So that was
That's
really
so
cool.
beautiful. And can I actually give you one other example of how pigeons and other birds have adapted in such a beautiful way to living alongside us in big cities?
Yes, absolutely.
So, pigeons are one amazing example of how brilliantly some animals have learned to live alongside humans in cities and worlds that we've built with virtually no consideration for anyone other than ourselves. But we recently discovered that sparrows and finches in Mexico City actually collect smoked cigarette butts, unroll them, and then weave the fibers from the cigarette butts into their nests because they've learned that it deters mites and ticks who would otherwise, attack their chicks. So, despite the fact that we kind of act as if there are no other animals or no other species in the world who are important or who we should pay any attention to, I mean, we are surrounded by these brilliant, sensitive, intelligent animals who are incredibly resourceful and find ways to live alongside us. So, if anything, we should have reverence and respect for them. But, far too often we malign them or we think of them as, quote unquote pests and think we should just do away with them.
Yeah, I know, like in the Staten Island ferry years ago, there was kind of like a war on the pigeons in the ferry. It was very sad because and actually I'm pretty sure people actually stood up for the pigeons at that point, and they were like, you shouldn't be killing them. There's no reason for that. They didn't do anything.
Absolutely. And it's I'm just thinking this because you're mentioning the sort of relationship between pigeons and boats, that I just wish that people knew how incredible their capabilities are. Because in the late 1970s, the US Coast Guard actually had a program where they trained pigeons, because they have such amazing eyesight, to identify sailors lost at sea by teaching them to notice the orange life jackets. So when they put the pigeons up to the test against their human counterparts, the pigeons were quicker to identify the lost sailor than the humans were 84% of the time. And the program was eventually phased out and replaced with software and all sorts of more efficient technology. But it's just another demonstration of how capable and brilliant these birds are.
Yeah, and there was actually something I had wanted to mention about technology, since you did mention that, specifically with regard to like boating. When we had met with the Coast Guard up on top of the lighthouse, they were talking about how, we're all now, they don't teach sailors how to use lighthouses anymore as much, and they don't teach sailors don't learn as much how to rely on the stars to guide them. And so they're using all of these modern technologies, which, as I'm sure we all know, from we're using Skype, we're using GPSs. How many times do you go in the Holland Tunnel and your signal is gone? Like if you're out at
Right.
sea
As we've
and you
experienced
don't,
with Skype today.
and when you're out at sea and you don't have that knowledge of how to back it up, that's kind of like a place where technology can really fail people, because it's important to know where they are. It's important to know how to read the stars. And that's kind of like, from what we were told, it's like a dying art, which is kind of really sad, because if you don't have a backup, what happens when those things fail? It's
Right.
it's and especially with like with the pigeons and stuff like that, it's like that seems like a really good backup that they could have continued to use. But of course, then they're exploiting the pigeons for their ability and stuff like that too. So it's kind of like two sides of a different argument.
Yeah, I think
And
oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that illustrates that rather than trying to sort of exploit animals and use them for our own purposes, we really should learn from them. Because as you're mentioning, pigeons have this unbelievable, still somewhat mysterious ability actually to navigate, because they can tap into the Earth's magnetic field. And there's still some debate in the scientific community about how exactly they're able to do this. Some people think that they have something in their eyes that actually allows them to see the Earth's magnetic field somehow. There's other theories that there's something about their brain chemistry that allows them to sense it. But in any case, we do know that they are able to tap into the Earth's magnetic field, and that's what gives them this remarkable navigational ability. That paired with the fact that they can fly over 500 miles at a time at speeds of 50 miles an hour. I mean, they're just the most incredible navigators in the world, and they make our use of GPS really look pathetic.
Right. Yeah, and there have been when you're looking at scientific experiments to try to figure out why things happen, I think there is more instances in science where they know something happens, but they don't know why. And sometimes they just call it a miracle, which is really kind of strange. But they can't always figure out why. It may be 15 different things that are working together inside of the pigeon that allow them to see this, the magnetic field, or feel it, or whatever it might be, that humans will never understand, but they could still understand that it happens, like, rather than having to explain everything, I guess is kind of like what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
And would you like to comment on what appears to be their superior flying ability, such as we've actually seen videos of where they almost got ran over by a car, but they did like this massive backflip 3 times and they were able to reorient themselves. They can also fly very long distances with little rest, and being able to always find their way home. That may have actually added to their heroic abilities during wars and at other times. So would you like to talk a little bit about how their flying abilities?
Yeah, pigeons. Well, this actually might be a good time that another word for pigeons, or a term for pigeons, is rock doves, which I like because it sounds a bit more graceful. Because so many people wrongly, incorrectly have this negative association with the word. But you know, pigeons and all birds really have incredible, all birds that fly, I should say, have incredible abilities to navigate through the sky and do all sorts of amazing acrobatics. And I think what is worth noting here is just the real wrongness of people taking birds and putting them in cages so that they could have them as pets. I mean, something that we've kind of just taken for granted how horrendous this actually is. This is one of their most fundamental behaviors, just soaring through the sky in this beautiful, graceful way. So taking them, locking them in a cage just so that we can be amused by looking and glancing their way every so often is just morally unjustifiable and really awful.
Cool. And do you mean like with regards to the birds that people tend to keep as house pets, or people capturing pigeons and putting them in cages?
Oh, that's a good question. So I actually meant that largely in reference to parrots or other wild birds that people keep as companions, but it's equally true of pigeons. I mean, really any of these birds who clearly don't belong in captivity. They belong in the open skies where they can fly and do what nature intended them to do. But far too many of these birds spend their entire existence locked inside of a tiny cage.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually was, we ended up watching a movie that we're going to be reviewing. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The Penguin Lessons. I kind of found it a little bit boring, but it was because it was very political. It was about this gentleman in Argentina who was a professor who him and this girl were walking along a beach, and they found like 10 penguins that had been killed in an oil slick, and one was still alive. And so he rescued it, but then the penguin would not leave his side. He tried to release it, he tried to put it in the ocean, and the penguin just came up to him and stood there and waited for him to take him home. And then he tried to put him in a zoo, and when he saw what the zoo was like, he was like, he's just going to die in the zoo in a day. Like it was I guess it was 1976, so it kind of makes sense. The conditions were even worse than they are now. But I thought it was interesting because he didn't capture the penguin. He rescued the penguin, and the penguin wouldn't leave. And this was actually based on a true story. But the way that he kind of treated the penguin when he had him was not the best. Like it really just was not. Like he didn't like the penguin for some reason until the very end. Then he started to like the penguin, and everybody else around him loved the penguin except for him, because he was mean, I guess you could say. Now you were mentioning there was one pigeon who had gotten a Medal of Honor in France. Can you speak to which wars the pigeons were heroes in? If they've been other than that one, if they've been formally honored for their heroism, either individually or as a species, either by this government or by those in other countries?
Yeah, so Cher Ami, the pigeon you just referenced, was honored for his service in World War One. I mean, it feels a little bit funny to say service since the pigeons obviously aren't choosing to fight in the war. In most cases, they're being forced to. But in any case, that was World War One. They also served in World War Two and carried messages. I'm sorry, again through enemy fire, and displayed unbelievable heroism. But just to go back to what you mentioned about the story about the penguin, which I think is also actually true of Cher Ami, the pigeon who was awarded by the French government, is that it's just a perfect illustration of the fact that all animals are these incredible, sensitive, intelligent individuals, and that's why we want everyone to know that every animal is someone who feels fear and pain and joy and love. They have families who they care for. They have lives that are fulfilling and meaningful to them. And that really, in all the ways that matter, we are all the same. So just let tomorrow be the first day that you look at animals with a new set of eyes and just have reverence and respect for them, because that's really what they deserve.
And then you had mentioned about World War One, the Shunmead, I think you said the pigeon's name was.
Yeah, Cher Ami.
So Cher Amin, was that pigeon on like the American side, and then they were honored in France, or was the bird from America or from France, or where were they from?
The origins of Cher Ami are actually subject to some debate. I think a lot of people think Cher Ami was born in the UK, but was acting in service of the American forces. It's still somewhat of a mystery to me why it was the French government that awarded Cher Ami with this Medal of Honor. But in any case, it's wonderful to know that this is an instance where humans have recognized how heroic pigeons have been and how they, like so many animals, have no ill intent towards us and in fact have come to our rescue many, many times.
Cool. And so were they only, I guess, utilized as helpers by the American and obviously British, French, I forget what they called it, I think the Allies forces, or were they also utilized on the other side as well?
So I believe they were actually used by both sides of at least World War One. Obviously, regardless of which side anyone has particular sympathies towards, it was not the pigeons' fault because they didn't choose which side they were fighting for. They were obviously just forced into the situation.
And outside of the one that you mentioned, were they honored for their heroism in other instances?
Yeah, there's another pigeon whose name I believe was Valiant, who was also honored for their service in World War One, I believe. But it's just again another illustration of just how incredible these birds are. And I keep returning to this fact just because so often people just bully pigeons. They'll charge at them to try to get them to fly away. They'll malign them. They'll make fun of them when they're just incredible and capable, intelligent, sensitive animals who just deserve kindness and compassion like both of us do.
Right, right. And so I know when we had the conversation with the Humane Long Island, John D. Leonardo, about turkeys, he had actually mentioned that people shouldn't get rid of turkeys because they're eating the bugs that you don't like in your garden, and other pests and things like that. So is that something that could also be said for pigeons? Do they eat bugs that would normally like infest people's houses or scare away predators?
Well, if you wouldn't mind, Heather, I'd actually love to use this as an opportunity to tell you about another wildlife related issue that completely relates to this, just while we have time, glue traps. Because, in New York City and around the state, actually, there's a big movement to ban these glue traps because they're the cruelest form of pest control, wildlife control imaginable, because they catch animals and subject them to a slow, painful death. And the reason I bring this up in connection to what you just mentioned is that oftentimes glue traps catch bats, they catch snakes, they catch all of these animals that eat insects and actually end up achieving the goal that humans are setting out towards just far more effectively. The animals, that is. So these glue traps are just unbelievably cruel, and the time to ban them is right now. And there are bills in the New York State Senate and New York State Assembly. It's S3046 in the Senate and A54 in the State Assembly that would ban these horrible traps. And they also catch pigeons, birds, really all animals who are small enough to wander across or land on the surface of the traps.
And something I wanted to mention, because you said that, so New Yorkers and people in every city could do well to carry a little bottle of olive oil with them. Because if you see a glue trap and the animals are still alive, you can save them hopefully without drowning them in the olive oil. But if you put like a drop of olive oil on the glue trap and you kind of move it around a little bit and then you give it some time, they can pull themselves off of it. We actually just had a rescue a vole the other day in exactly that way. So that's something. So if you see a glue trap, that doesn't mean the end for those creatures. You can actually help them.
That is so true. And, it's on all of us to really be the eyes and ears on the street for animals who are in distress. So I would say, I think that's great advice. If you found a bird trapped to a glue trap, stuck to a glue trap, in New York City, I would absolutely say reach out to the Wild Bird Fund immediately, only because their feathers and their wings are so sensitive that it can be, really, really difficult to help get them off the trap yourself without further injuring them. But to just sort of hammer home the point, these traps are just unbelievably cruel. They're completely indiscriminate. So that's why, everyone in New York should contact their state assembly members and state senators and ask them to co-sponsor this bill that would ban these cruel traps throughout the state.
Sure, absolutely. And you said it was S 3406, and what was the A one?
An A54. So the Senate bill was sponsored by Senator Jabari Brisport, and the Assembly bill was sponsored by Assembly Member Harvey Epstein.
Okay.
And I should mention that both bills are picking up a huge amount of support right now. They thousands and thousands of people have written into their representatives asking them to co-sponsor the bill. I believe there's 15 co-sponsors on the Assembly bill already. And for everyone, even those outside of New York, everyone can do their part by never buying or using these cruel glue traps.
Awesome. And is there anything else that you would like to add today?
Really just that everyone should feel empowered, like with what you mentioned before about helping this poor vole who was stuck to a glue trap, to help animals when they see an animal in distress. So whether that's through calling a hotline like PETA's emergency pager or the Wild Bird Fund, or just leaving out water during a drought or a heat wave, the least we can do is be good neighbors to all of these amazing animals who we coexist and live in harmony with. So, as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. It's the perfect place to start that is in your relationships with animals.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was really great to speak with you today. I appreciate your taking the time to meet with us.
Thank you so much. You too.
Have a great day.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.